There's really nothing exciting about taxes, but that's only if you're thinking of them in the context of tradfi or traditional finance, or even the way we've thought about them for, well, seemingly forever. Although in crypto, taxes are different. This is because in crypto, NFTs and DeFi, or decentralized finance, there's a lot of volatility in prices, unreal interest yields, and just generally little to no regulatory frameworks passed down by the government on how we should go about filing crypto, NFT, and DeFi related tax events. This is all the more reason why I was super excited to chat with my guest today, Micah Fraim. Micah runs a CPA firm that specializes in crypto tax support and has a portfolio of clients that will likely continue to grow with crypto's long-term forecasted mass adoption. Micah is an author of crypto tax-related books, and as he says on this episode, is one of the earliest leaders in a space where more and more CPAs and tax specialists are diving in to understand how to tax crypto, NFTs, DeFi, and other blockchain-related products. On this episode, let's decrypt crypto taxes with Micah. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is More Than Blockchain. Micah, welcome to More Than Blockchain. How are you doing?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for hopping on. And as we were just saying right before we got recording, we kind of really don't know one another. I'm not even sure how many More Than Blockchain episodes you've been able to listen to, but I assume that you are really busy in the work that you're doing, especially as you get into the new year. I know that people who get their taxes done, clients that come to you probably to get their taxes done before March, those are heroes because then it stops the backlog probably in May when I always text my CPA and freak him out. So I'm really excited to chat tonight, and we're going to talk about crypto and taxes. I know that may sound like a boring conversation for some. Well, I guess I just think in TradFi, taxes maybe aren't like a sexy thing to talk about, but I do think when it comes to crypto, it's super, super important. And I'm just beyond the moon excited because I've been trying to bring in someone to talk about taxes. But as you've said, that's easier said than done because even though we have trillion-dollar spaces here of crypto, it's seemingly very bare. So talk to me about your own journey with taxes and then maybe how you made that transition into crypto.
Yeah, so I'll always say that, like most people, 2017 came around with the ICO craze and Bitcoin rallying up to 20,000. So I threw $3,000 in the market, which quickly turned into $1,000 when things came back to reality. And then kind of left it alone and checked the portfolio, and it had recovered a good bit back up to like 6 to 9 grand, somewhere thereabouts, come 2020. And so around that time, there was a client who was involved in their own blockchain project that told me about it, got really excited about it. And then that was sort of just the gateway to me really getting excited about the space. And I very quickly realized as I was trying to dig into it for myself that there was next to no guidance out there and very, very few CPAs who seemed to understand the space at all. So a big part of what we were doing was just trying to navigate this for ourselves and for the clients that we had who are in blockchain. And since there's not many of us out there, we got a ton of demand as we started just networking in the space and talking to other people. So that's where we've been spending a lot of our time the past couple of years, just building this side up.
Very, very cool. And I think that's something that it was an entrepreneur talking, I was listening to on a podcast and whatever, consuming content as we do, maybe on YouTube. And they were saying, if you have a problem and you can solve it and you do it in a way that's efficient and actually hits to the heart of the issue of the problem, not like an ancillary problem, then you now have a case study that it works. And then if you can get other people to kind of buy into that solution, it could be a viable thing. So that sounds kind of what you've done. And I see this is an audio podcast, so people really probably can't see this, but I see that you have your swag on from, it looks like your...
Oh yeah, from the CPA firm. And then I mean, I'll throw it on pretty much anything. I got one mug here with it.
Yeah, I love it.
Got a second mug of a different type with our.
So you're really inspiring me because I'm working on swag right now for More Than Blockchain, and actually as a guest, you're going to get some swag, which is kind of cool.
Sweet.
So maybe you could throw that on every once in a while. But I think maybe we'll talk again in the spring, no matter how this goes, because I think I want to talk to you around tax time when it's top of mind and people are, when it's May 10th and people are starting to sweat. But going back to your journey, you and your partner in the CPA firm just started to dabble into this. You on the personal side, because you had invested in the 2017 ICO craze. That's also when I got in 2017 in that kind of whirlwind that it was, where you take some money, see what happens, and sometimes it goes up crazily, and you've never seen that before. So you then say, okay, we get a couple clients that maybe come to you and they're like, hey, how do we do NFTs? How do we do crypto? From maybe where you started, how long have you been working with crypto clients, and how much has your client portfolio kind of grown? Because story in my head is it's gone to the moon.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because we started in 2017 and did a little bit with it, but never marketed. I wasn't super serious about it until 2020. What we're finding that's kind of interesting, we've got a fair number of crypto clients, and it's growing pretty quickly as we start marketing, just because there's nobody else. No, I won't say there's nobody else out there, but it's a really short list of the people who seem to know what we're doing in the space. What's hurt us a little bit that's been interesting is just market conditions. Because 2021, we had people coming to us nonstop, and same with the beginning of 2022. As things have been crashing, it's been a little bit interesting just because most people, if they got involved in 2020, or unless they've been around for a while, they're underwater a fair bit on their portfolio. So some people were interested, lost the enthusiasm when the market stopped being so bullish. The other thing that's been kind of interesting is people who had amazing 2021, so they've got these massive tax bills, but did zero tax planning. So now they've got, and sometimes six-figure tax bills, but they weren't liquidating any of their portfolio as things went on so that they could pay the tax bill. And I'll give one example, and it's sort of a amalgamation of like multiple clients, just because we're trying to we're not going to give out confidential details, but the sort of compound example I'll give is someone who had $1 million of realized gains in 2021, was just absolutely crushing it. But they kept rolling it. Most of it was from this NFT project. They kept rolling it back into the project. So anytime they'd have profits, it would just keep putting it back in. Well, the project went down about 99%. So they had well into the six figures of a tax bill that they've got to deal with, but their portfolio is down so much that they don't have the money to pay the tax bill. So we just didn't really hear. So we've got people like that where you just don't hear from them after you give them the maneuvers they could have done, the things that we can still do. But the ultimate reality is that, yeah, you're pretty well hosed, and here's kind of the ballpark of the figure. And then I think one of the issues you have with crypto bros anyway is sort of this idea that, oh, the IRS can't track this. This is magic internet money. They don't need to know about. So then I think they just sort of bury their heads in the sand and just hope that the IRS never notices that they had all this taxable income.
So are they wrong?
Oh yeah. So just wrong in every way you could be, because it depends on the bucket of income, and that's what gets a little bit tough when we're doing shorter discussions, because any bucket of crypto income could be its own multi-hour discussion. But if you're doing, most crypto transactions you have are going to create some kind of taxable event. If you're doing coin for coin trades, even if you don't cash out for fiat, that's a taxable transaction. If you're getting mining income, if you're getting node income, if you're getting deposit interest rewards, if you're getting staking income, if you're doing play to earn games, if you're trading FTs, if you're doing most anything in crypto, there is a transaction that generates that you're typically supposed to report. And there's a lot of things we can do to mitigate the ultimate tax hit that you get from that. But a lot of those, especially these people who are coming to us after the year closes, a lot of those things need to be done before the end of the year. So once January hits, we lose a lot of our flexibility. So these people who have just been kind of riding high on their own, not really thinking about it, some of them deal with some pretty massive pain once they actually take it a little more seriously and talk to an accountant to see what they have to report.
Okay, so I was going to ask you a hypothetical, but you already provided a real world example, and I love that you're not sharing any of the client's information, and that's a nice thing to do. I have a real world example of my own, and I'm interested. So I was going to give you a hypothetical, but why not? I will use myself as the guinea pig, and you can kind of giggle along here at my stupidity. So before I say this, I want to say that the beautiful thing about crypto is a double-edged sword. It's that you control your own money. You can't call the bank, you can't call the branch manager, you can't have FDIC hold your hand. When you lose crypto, that can be it. It's up to you. So, my story is this. FTX, as everyone listening to this now knows, imploded. It blew up. FTX before this had bailed out BlockFi. BlockFi was in some trouble about 2 to 3 months ago, two
Yeah.
to three, 4 months ago. And when this happened, Sam Bankman-Fried came in and said, "You know what? Let me save BlockFi. I'm a nice guy. I'm the nicest guy in crypto. Let me save BlockFi." He did that. Thank you, Sam Bankman-Fried. I had money in BlockFi. Now, when the FTX thing blew up, I got out 90% or a large chunk of the money that I had in there. And I left a little bit in there, but I had an issue moving that money because I didn't want to do the coin trade, trade it into another coin. And so this kind of gets a little technical and geeky, but I'm sure that you'll enjoy this and maybe some of the other listeners will enjoy it. I had 4 different cryptocurrencies on BlockFi earning interest. I had Bitcoin, I had GUSD, which is a stable coin, I had USDC, which is a stable coin, and I had Litecoin. However, to protect my bag on BlockFi, I had made all of those and anything I had BlockFi whitelisted, which simply means that you cannot get it off the exchange without putting in the address that you want to send it to, having it be approved, and you have to wait 7 days. Why would I do this? So that way, if someone ever got into my account, they can't drain my account immediately. They'll have to go through 2FA a couple times and then wait 7 days. So I thought that this was going to be a good thing. Turns out it was a bad thing because when I wanted to move my Bitcoin, GUSD, USDC, and Litecoin, I couldn't because the only thing that I had approved as another external account was my Ethereum. So what I should have done in hindsight, when I moved all the other Ethereum off, I should have sold all those into Ethereum and then moved them off of BlockFi. Mike, I hope you're still following me.
No, no, no. That
Okay,
that makes
okay,
perfect sense.
okay, cool. So then what I did after I moved off the Ethereum that I had, which was the majority of my bag on that particular exchange, was I went back in and I said, this is just even 12 hours later. And I said, you know what? Let me do something. Let me sell all of these into Ethereum, trade the Bitcoin into Ethereum, Litecoin into Ethereum, the USD into Ethereum, and the GUSD into Ethereum. Now I can move the Ethereum because I already have an approved external address to send it to. I went to
Mhm.
do that. In that time, BlockFi shut down.
They froze it
They
in those
froze it.
12 hours. Crap.
Yeah, which is so annoying because the official thing hadn't come out until after I had done the send. So I'm going to send screenshots and be like, this is when I tried to send this. This is
Yeah,
when you actually told me as a customer, it's not that much. Could you move it? Right. So
yeah.
anyway, we'll see what happens. But my question here is to my new crypto CPA, Micah. When I traded those 4 cryptocurrencies, being Bitcoin, Litecoin, the 2 stablecoins, into Ethereum, that was a taxable event. So let's say in that event, I accrued $3,000 I have to pay back. Let's say it was $10,000 and I'm at a 30% tax bracket for short-term gains or something. I want to kind of build a hypothetical, but
Sure.
but I guess the question is, let's say I have to pay $3,000 on that trade. Now, because the money is probably going to be lost in
Mhm.
BlockFi, how does that work? And I know hopefully at home you're not like, "Oh,
Yeah.
Jared's really taking advantage of this guy getting this advice in the
No, but
podcast."
I mean,
But I
it's an
think it's a good
interesting.
example.
Well, it's a really good example, and it's one that there's not a super clear answer to. At least the ultimate conclusion is reasonably clear, but like to back up a little bit on it, for all these exchanges that are going bankrupt, and I think there's like, if Gemini announces, I think that'll be 5. Right now, it's been BlockFi, FTX, Voyager, and Celsius. We wrote a blog article about how to write off those those losses on these insolvent exchanges. The thing that gets hard is that even though ultimately we know that you're either going to lose all of it or you're going to lose the majority of it, these exchanges simply declaring bankruptcy doesn't allow you to write off those losses yet, because 10 to 15% of bankruptcies do actually, the company does recover. There's a chance during the bankruptcy proceedings you'll get a portion of your holdings back, and we don't know what that is until you go through the process, which can be several years down the road. So for a lot of people who held a bunch of money on these exchanges, you're going to write those off as non-business bad debt, but we kind of have to wait to see the conclusion of those bankruptcy filings to see what you're going to get back. So you had realized gains with that trade, even though you did have those transactions, so imminently you lost access to the funds. You lost all your dominion, what you call dominion and control, or sometimes domain and control is the term that we'll use. So if I'm in that situation, and we can, yours was really interesting just because it was so close to the trade from when you lost control of it. But you can have a similar thing with people who held, you're on Celsius was given some of the best interest rates, and wonder why that didn't work out, and the real clear in hindsight. But people who had were earning this interest, but then lost the asset. Um, it's hard to really make a case that you actually earned that money. So there's no official answer to this, especially from the IRS, because the IRS has only issued guidance on like 5 crypto topics total. But if you report the trade, which I think you probably want to, just so there's no mismatch between the trades that you executed versus what might get reported to the IRS, what I would report as I would be truing up your cost basis more than likely to make it a net zero for now. Then when the bankruptcy, if you get anything from the bankruptcy, then you'd be more inclined, if you get a recovery, to count that recovery as income or adjust it then. But given the fact that you execute a trade, but then immediately weren't able to get the tokens, I would be hesitant to report an actual taxable gain on that on your return.
That's what I was thinking. It's a pretty small amount of money relative to the rest of my what my
Yeah.
taxes will look like with my personal taxes and a W-2, and then I have an LLC where I do some consulting through. So it's not like it's not like the prime piece that I'd be worried about. And like you said, my trading and then my loss of the domain or dominion and control happened within the same 24
Right,
hours.
so quickly.
Yeah, and so it's like, I win the big stuffed animal at the fair, and then within 5 minutes, the police come along and take it, and I'm like, well, did I actually win it?"
Right, did you actually execute that trade? Because especially, I mean, that time frame, I think, is, especially in your case, is especially important, because it's not like you were doing a ton of trading and then 6 months later, it got frozen. And that's part of why I'm hedging a little bit, because I do think so many of these situations are going to be case by case, and you're going to look at the particulars of each person's situation. Because BlockFi, I think they declared a couple days ago, if you're doing a ton of trading in January and you've just got a bunch of taxable gains, and then 11 months later they freeze withdrawals, that's a lot stickier situation. That's a lot more, that it's, the situation's just more opaque then, because the two events aren't so closely tied together. But when it's that close, especially in the market we're in now, I think you've got an easier case to be, probably show the proceeds of the trade, but the cost basis, I think, would be reflective of the fact that you've immediately lost control of it.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking, and I'm not sure if this is the right thing to do, but I was gonna say, "Okay, I made this profit, this realized gain, but then also I had this huge loss, which would obviously then just wipe
Mhm.
away that profit." I think that that's the best way, to be honest, because the IRS is gonna see from my Social Security number, "Hey, he had these realized gains," but then I also wanna say, "Yeah, but," which was X percent, but, 5X of that, or whatever, whatever the taxes will be. I'm not sure. I believe that they were long-term capital gains, but, then he did lose all of this. So I'm not is it would
Yeah.
that be the way more or less to do it?
There's no official guidance. That's probably the way I would approach it with a situation like yours. The ones where there's more time in between, I think you need to look at each situation to see if it's it's also relative to the scope of how much money are we talking about. There's a lot of little things you have to look at, but these things get the technical details, and sometimes it's hard to give specific answers on these things. And I'll go to another example, like with FTX specifically. So FTX, the more won't say this for sure, and alleged crimes and alleged whatever, but more and more, it seems like FTX would meet the definition of a Ponzi scheme. And back in 2009, when Bernie Madoff had his whole hedge fund Ponzi scheme come apart, they released a revenue ruling that allows people, for regular capital losses, you're only able to use up to $3,000 of capital losses to offset against your ordinary income. So your wages, your business income, stuff like that. But you had people who lost millions and millions of dollars. They said, I don't want to have to wait to get this tax benefit. I lost my life savings. I want to use it now. So they allowed people who were victims of Ponzi schemes to write the entire thing off in the year the fraud was discovered. And so, again, we wrote a blog article on that and kind of the parameters and what people would need to look at. But really interestingly, if you look back at that 2009 revenue ruling, analysis that some really good tax attorneys did said that people who were directly investing in Bernie Madoff's fund, okay, you're a victim of a Ponzi scheme. But what about people who are investing in hedge funds that invested in Bernie Madoff's hedge fund? What about people who had effectively derivative products and derivative exposure? And the analysis we've read is that they did not qualify because they were not the direct victims of the Ponzi scheme. So there's little nuances like that where BlockFi why did BlockFi and all these BlockFi especially is the one just that I'm thinking of, but BlockFi largely went under because of FTX and the money that exposure they had to FTX. But people who are losing money on BlockFi aren't going to get the same tax benefits that people who are direct FTX users likely would. And that's kind of and especially since we have this cascading every day there's a new failure, that's what's going to be really, really interesting, but also really difficult is looking at the particulars of all these situations to see exactly how much they fall in line with some of these provisions that have been outlined, or if they're kind of stuck with the less favorable tax treatment.
It's really interesting that you brought up Bernie Madoff because the second that this happened, I got very worried about BlockFi because I knew that FTX had helped out BlockFi, so I knew that they were
Mm-hmm.
financially tied to one another. And when the Madoff thing happened, it was absolutely incredible. I think Madoff total was like 65 billion, and because it was a Ponzi scheme, it basically meant that all that money, just didn't really exist. It was all floating in midair. And I remember there was a podcast that was done on this, and maybe you've heard it too. It's a fairly prominent one, but it was talking about how exactly what you're talking about. That if you were a couple of dominoes away from Madoff, you couldn't say you were a victim. You couldn't play victim because of the way the whole game is set up. And it was talking about this pension fund, and I believe it was in Chile. And these people in Chile, their pension fund had invested in a hedge fund, and that hedge fund was part of a bank, and that bank
Mm-hmm.
had exposure to Madoff. So it's 2 or 3 levels removed, but these people in Chile just got wiped out. And they had no idea why. They don't even know who Bernie Madoff is. None of them have ever been to New York. They don't
Mm-hmm.
know any of how that game's played. They've never invested in the stock market. But because they had bought a pension product from a hedge fund or something, or from a bank, which is owned by a hedge fund. Anyways, multiple levels removed, they were not able to play, hey, how do I get, made whole from this? And I feel like now I am that being
Yeah.
part of BlockFi.
Well, it's at least with the Madoff case and the revenue rulings and the revenue procedure that came out because of that, the big thing is fraudulent intent. So for Bernie Madoff, or in this case, SBF, you've got fraudulent intent that is assumed there. But the hedge fund manager who invested in Bernie Madoff's fund, or the bank manager who invested, unless you can show that those people knew that it was fraud and thereby they had their own fraudulent intent, you're kind of stuck, which is really unfortunate because it seems like, again, every day, you said there's a new domino that hits. Seems like every day there's some new thing where you're having the market is just, and then we had CZ try to sound like he was trying to go after Coinbase last week. It's causing these crazy waves throughout the whole market, but in terms of the tax benefit from it, unless you're an FTX user, at least based on the data that is around now, you've got pretty limited recourse from the tax benefits you can take.
Yeah. I actually think we could probably talk about this whole quagmire for probably 2 hours, but I do have a list of questions that I'd like to
Yeah,
get to, even though
yeah.
maybe people were like, no, keep talking about Madoff because it's one of the more fascinating things ever
Mhm.
happened in human history. When it comes to taxes, I want to ask you, and I'm going to create a hypothetical about NFTs
Yeah.
because I have NFTs and I bought them through my MetaMask. Now, my MetaMask is not KYC or AML,
Mhm.
right? That's done at the level of Coinbase or Binance where I bought the crypto. So I buy the crypto by taking US dollars, putting it in Binance. They give me Ethereum. I transfer that into my MetaMask wallet, and then I buy an NFT. Buy an NFT for $1,000 in Ethereum, whatever that is, let's say. The NFT goes up 100x because NFTs, right? That's how we're all going to get
Yeah.
rich. Now it's worth $100,000. Okay. I then take out that money. So I have a realized gain and it's a short term profit
Mhm.
because it's happened in 2 weeks, right? Because NFTs, that's how everyone's going to get rich.
Right.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
saying that very sarcastically. Do not listen to me, people at home. But now I have $99,000 of realized gains and my short term, short term capital gains. So let's say I take home $75,000, right? That's
Mhm.
what I take home after paying taxes. My question is, do I have to pay taxes on that NFT? Because the IRS doesn't know that wallet. And they're not there yet where they're on sitting on Etherscan is my story in my head to figure out when I buy
Yeah.
whatever NFT I bought. So how does that work? Couldn't I just keep that in Ethereum and then let that go up over the next 10 years? And then obviously the day I do change it back into US dollars or I send it back to that wallet, the Binance wallet, just talk to me about where the taxable events are in that. And because
Yeah.
many people who have bought NFTs have done it through MetaMask and have not done any KYC. So therefore, it leads me to believe that the IRS really can't track that activity. Obviously, if I bring that $75,000 of Ethereum back into my Binance and try to take it out in US dollars, that's where the taxable event in my mind would be. But what am I missing? What are you
Well,
seeing?
yeah.
And yeah, talk to me.
Well, I mean, that's the perspective we run into all the time because there's a couple things. One is that people will say, well, they'll confuse I haven't been caught yet with the IRS can't catch me. Because across the board, the IRS, what we're seeing, and we saw this with a case in Tennessee called Jarrett versus USA, where a couple is suing over the taxation of their Tezos tokens and that staking income. The IRS has gotten next to no guidance, no legislation from Congress on how to treat crypto. So for the most part, the IRS is a lot happier just enforcing legislation that Congress has passed versus coming up with their own interpretation. So, given how crazy expansive crypto is, what a new market is, how quickly it's changing, and how underfunded the IRS is, what a lot of what we're seeing is the IRS is just kind of waiting in the wings and seems to be kicking the can down the road, waiting to get explicit guidance from Congress. So in the meantime, they're working on their AI. They've got new agents who are being hired, but they're not like actively going after a, a lot of taxpayers, including crypto traders. So you've got that element where the IRS is there waiting. They're just not going crazy yet. The IRS, of the few things that they have issued explicit guidance on, they've said that coin for coin, token for token trades are taxable. They haven't said anything about NFTs, but you can it's not a hard leap based on the guidance they have that NFT trading is the same thing. So if you're trading your Bitcoin for Ethereum, for Tezos, for I was going to say Luna, which I guess still exists, but every one of those trades is still a taxable event, even if you're not cashing it out for fiat. So each one of those, you've got a gain or a loss on. What people say, like you're saying, most of the trading people will do will happen off exchange. So let's say, well, the IRS, there's no KYC here; they're never going to find that. And under the current model that the IRS has of just kind of hanging out, unless unless you just randomly get audited, you're probably not going to get a letter from them. They're probably not going to look at it. But one, if you do get audited, and two, as their systems get better and as they do get more aggressive, it's not too hard for them to figure out to look at the paper trail on the blockchain to see what's going on. Because I mean, the blockchain is auditable by design. So all they're going to have to say is be like, okay, well, we know from your KYC you've got a Binance US account, you've got a Coinbase account, and you keep sending a crap ton of money to this address. So let's look at that address. And then once they look at that MetaMask address, they're going to see all this trading activity that you didn't report. And not only are you going to be in for a world of hurt with the taxes and penalties that you'd owe retroactively, depending on how it's rare for people to go to jail for like tax fraud, but depending on how much it looked like you were actively trying to obfuscate and hide it, they could theoretically go after criminal charges if it made it really clear, like you're doing mining and you're using Tor and then you're using Monero to do all your trades. If you're doing something where it just is really clear the whole point of this is to avoid taxes, there could be things more serious than just penalties. So the IRS guidance we have is that it is all taxable, and if their systems get better or you do get audited and they look at the places you do have KYC, they're going to see all that stuff on the true DeFi platforms and self custody. So you might be okay for a while, but it's going to hurt really bad if they take a second look, because it's not going to take a genius to figure out what's going on.
That is both the beauty and the ugly side of the blockchain, that there's nowhere in the future to hide from it. And I think
Hmm.
that this is, it's the double-edged sword of that, which is great. So, how long away do you think we are from that world where the IRS is going to be basically Etherscan, and they're going to be able to just go and connect those dots, as you're saying, and be like, well, so and so has a Coinbase, a Gemini, a Binance US, and they're moving all this money to this wallet. Let's look at that. Oh, wow, she's holding, they're holding these, wow, they have 10 bored apes worth this much money and they've never declared, and they've flipped it a
Yeah.
couple times and bought back. And because one of the things I know happens in crypto that I'm sure you see or your clients are saying, and I forget the names, but hopefully you'll bring the name. I want to call it acid washing. I know it's not acid washing, but it's where you're selling crypto and buying it back immediately, so it makes it look like you
Yeah.
have a loss on your books. What are the other things right now that you're seeing that are not good and that people should definitely stay away from, even if it's okay now?
Well, even I mean, right now, the wash sale rule, which is what happens when with traditional securities, if you sell a stock for a loss, you've got to wait at least 30 days to buy it back. Otherwise, you're not allowed to take the loss. Right now, that's not prohibited because the IRS says that for crypto, you can sell it and immediately buy it back. And if you realize the loss, you're able to take the loss because crypto is considered property, not a security. So that's actually one of, at the moment, the legitimate maneuvers you can make, and especially now that everyone's portfolios are down, is often a pretty legit maneuver. That loophole is going to be changed in the future. We're just not sure when, because I think in 2020 or 2021 they started proposing legislation to close that loophole, and it's never happened. So you can do that. There are a couple questions you had in there. One is how far we are from that future. It's really hard to tell because the IRS doesn't, they're not trying to telegraph what they're going to do. I do think whatever that time frame was got accelerated by about 3 to 5 years with this FTX situation. Because regulators were already had their eyes on crypto. The SEC chair has been really pushing to get for them to be able to have more control over the enforcement. And now you've got this, can't remember what the number was, but I think the exposure from FTX last I saw was something like 50 to 60 billion dollars in liabilities that they had. That situation, legitimately some degree of crypto regulation is good and is probably necessary, as we're seeing with all these failures. But these failures being so high profile, all these legislators who have really wanted to go overboard with crypto regulation and have just wanted to kind of regulate into oblivion, were given the perfect excuse. They were just given this right on a platter. Just look at how fraught with fraud and this is, and how perilous it is to the customers. So, the same way this set back the public trust and the sentiment of crypto about 5 years, it probably accelerated whatever regulation we were going to see by about that same amount of time. So, what the second or third part where you're talking about either things to avoid or things that we should do? What was
Yeah, I guess I'm just interested because I that whole thing where you can sell crypto right now, take the loss, and then buy it back immediately, but still have the loss on your books. I don't think that that will survive 2023. I think in 2023
yeah.
in the down market, they're going to be regulations going to be a booming. I think that's when Congress is really going to be looking at that
Mhm.
because that is a way to really limit your tax exposure.
It's hugely beneficial and something that they don't want. They've been trying to close it for a few years. I agree. I'll be surprised if it survives the 2023 tax year. 2022 we're deep enough in, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that retroactive to the beginning of 2022 they'll disallow the sales that would have fallen under those wash sale rules. But by 2023, I'd be really surprised if by the time we're filing those returns, we're still allowed to do that.
Yeah, and you're saying in like May of 2024, you'd be surprised if people were able to get away with it throughout
Right.
2023. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
because I think it's ridiculous too. I have not done it, but I know people that do it, and maybe I'm being too much of a square, and I should do it and take advantage of the wild wild west. But I do think it's one of those things where people are going to look back and be like, "Wait, you could do that? Why didn't everyone do that?" You know. But I wanted to. I see that you've written some books. And I want to talk about the books. Are those just in PDF? Are they also hardcover? And what pushed you to write these books?
Well, they're on paperback, ebook, hardcover, and Audible. And for most of them, especially the one that I most recently, I don't know if we can even see this well. This is our most recent one. It's specific on crypto taxes called Decrypting Crypto Taxes. And a lot of it is as we were writing articles for our clients and just as a knowledge base, we were same thing when we were realizing there's no one who's writing this. There's no CPAs who really understand this. There's hardly any guidance out there. If you search for crypto tax on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or whatever, there's not really a whole lot out there. And the stuff that was written, a lot of times it was either from like 2017 or it was written by someone who clearly wasn't a crypto user. It was some CPA who took a continuing ed course and looked at it kind of academically, but had never actually executed a trade in their life, had never run a node, had never done anything. So the stuff we did find was outdated or just very like academic and missing some of the nuance just because they're not users. So a lot of the way that we wrote this book was basically every chapter is sort of like an FAQ that we've had. How is staking income taxed? Do I have to pay tax on my crypto credit card rewards? Do I have to pay tax when I swipe my crypto debit card? How are NFTs taxed? So most of them are phrased as a question of like, how is this taxed? Do I pay tax on that? Just because this stuff does get really complicated, and once you get deeper into it, you really do need help, which is why we stay busy. But it's also nice for someone just to, who are the people who are coming to us are typically people who are making six or more figures in crypto. That just the way our fee structure is, that's the only people where it actually makes sense. But it is also nice for a person who's dabbling in it, like, oh, do I have to pay tax on my staking income? And you go to the table of contents and it's like, do I pay tax on staking income? And then you can go and just get get a baseline understanding of what's going on here, because there's just an insane amount of the information that does exist is usually on like Discord servers or Telegram groups, and it's just as you would expect, just straight garbage most of the time. So people are making really significant financial decisions based on this kind of nonsense guidance. And again, that's okay for the guy who's just dabbling a little bit. It's fine for the guy who's just hodling, who's not executing trades. But for the people who are doing things that are generating taxable events of some kind, there's some pretty significant exposure there depending on the nature of the income, how much you're earning. Like one of the examples I'll give, no one does them anymore, but in 2021, when those ohm forks became all the rage, you'd have people who were earning crazy amounts of interest, but the token value was crashing. So most of the time, people made no money or lost money, but the interest income is in a different bucket than your capital gains and capital losses. So you'll have people who earned, the example we give is you put 10 grand into an ohm fork and you earn like $80,000 of interest because it was giving you 1 billion% interest a year or something. But in that same, or you put 100,000 in it and it owns all this. At the same time though, the token price is crashing and you sell. I'm butchering this example because I keep changing my numbers. Um, we'll have it to where you can have it to where you have a ton of interest income that was earned, but when you ultimately dispose of the token, you lost that same amount that you earned in interest. So you'd think that would be a wash. You'd think it would just level out, but because they fall in these different buckets, you have a capital loss that you can only use $3,000 at a time, but you've got this $80,000 of interest income that you have to claim. There's these weird situations out there that, I mean, it's one of the reasons we have fun with it, but it is it's also what makes it a real nightmare for people trying to do planning. So if you got a small portfolio or you're just totaling, you're fine, you're good. You've got a pretty simple situation. But if you do have things where you're receiving any sort of ongoing income, which anymore is the case with proof of stake being the main thing, with nodes, with more of the stuff coming on, you need to do real time planning. Otherwise, you're just going to get absolutely creamed when it comes tax time.
Yeah, that was the question I wanted to ask you was what are your favorite tools? And I know that there are tools out there that are free and some that you have to pay for, like SaaS products essentially, to track your crypto activity. If it is something that you are taking six figures or, more than 60 or 70,000 annually in profit off of, what are your favorite tools?
Yeah, so if you're just doing everything on one centralized exchange, the report the exchange gives you is fine because they've got your cost basis, they've got your holding period, all of that. At the point when you've got MetaMask or you've got any sort of self custody wallet, or you're just transferring across exchanges, you almost have to use one of those SaaS products. And most of them are pretty similar. Most of them have pretty good APIs to sync up with the exchanges. We'll typically use either Coinly or Coin Tracker, or if you've got a really, really active portfolio, like you're doing a trading bot and you've got like 1,000 transactions a day, the one we'll recommend for people with that is called cointracking.info. The reason being is that their unlimited plan, I think, is like $400 for the year, versus if you were trying to do that on Coin Tracker, you probably end up paying like $3,000 or $4,000 a year because of the pricing structure and how they tier it. So the more volume you have, the more that cointracking.info is helpful. But aside from that, any of the ones that pull, the less manual work you have to do, the better. So any of the ones that have integrations, APIs, who just have things that cleanly pulled into the program for you, that's your best bet, because the more manual entry you have to do, the more likely it is that it's just going to be wrong. There's too much going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the more you can automate, the better when it comes to that type of stuff when you're tracking because of how volatile the prices are too. Even
Mhm.
just within a day, you may see whatever you're buying go up 5 or 10%. And so it's not, it's just hard to deal with. People who listen to this podcast are all walks of life. They're people that are just getting into crypto. They're OGs. They're people that, dollar cost averaging or hodling. There are people that are flipping NFTs. There are people that are investing in this and day trading. There are people that are putting market buys and market sells and kind of checking in and out, a little bit more active, not full time day traders. If anyone wants to get in touch with you after the episode, they hear this episode because they're like, oh, I really need to talk to Micah. I need my crypto tax guy. Where can they find you? What's the best place to find you? Is it LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, through your website? Where are the places that you can be found?
Typically, it's going to be through LinkedIn or our website. So the for crypto clients, we've got a specific website called cryptotaxcpa.com, and that's got most of our FAQs, ability to schedule consults, all that stuff. And then LinkedIn, I use everything else, but Twitter I've always had a hard time with because it just moves too fast, and let alone now with just the insanity that's going on there, we don't check that nearly as much. So usually LinkedIn or our website is going to be our best bet.
Okay. Well, that's great. I want to thank you for hopping on here and also taking some pretty out of the box questions because I think I had more traditional questions about taxes and stuff. But talking about NFTs, talking about the wash sales, talking about my ridiculous example, which is just one of thousands and millions of an
Yeah.
anecdote of how people are going to deal with this. I think your example too of where you get it, where you're getting this crazy amounts of interest, but then you have this loss that you can only cover. Crypto taxes are anything but cut and dry. And if anything, maybe they spice up the tax world. So
For regular podcast, we've done interviews for years. I did a podcast for a while. It was a real struggle getting booked on a lot of podcasts because taxes themselves are so boring. Crypto tax, I think, given the insanity of the space, is like the one time when somehow taxes are welcome, given the uncertainty and just how bonkers the space is overall. So, yeah, this is the most popular we ever are when it comes to these discussions.
exactly. And that's all the more reason why I think I'd love to have you back on probably the end of Q3 of 2023 when taxes are going to be top of mind for people to really give another shout out, probably have some more examples of, hey, how are we going to,
Yeah.
I'll just basically source from the network and the community and say, hey, what
Yeah.
do you want to ask Micah? We can hop on and do that. We could even do a live or we'll figure it out. But I think that'd be great because this is going to be an ongoing situation. And this is also something that's going to continue to evolve, right?
Mhm.
The IRS or whoever the CFTC, whoever is going to eventually come down and try to figure out these things. I'm assuming IRS for taxes, but overall regulation, the government's not really sure how they're going to, which
Mhm.
which agency is going to cover it. So it's constantly moving, and as you said, it's moving at the speed of light. I know you're talking about Twitter, but that's kind of where the conversation of crypto happens.
Right.
So I want to thank you so much for hopping on, and I really look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, man, this has been great. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode. And if you'd like to get in touch with Micah on LinkedIn or check out his website, go ahead and check out this episode's show notes where I'll leave links to everything that he mentioned. As always, please follow us on social media at More Than Blockchain. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead and check out our website at morethanblockchain.xyz. And if you're new to crypto or you want to brush up on your crypto or Web3 knowledge, scroll down to the Learn section and there you'll find free cryptocurrency and Web3 classes. No matter where you're listening to this episode, please subscribe to the pod. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to follow us on YouTube at More Than Blockchain. Because in 2023, we're going to start having a lot more video content. If you know someone who would benefit from checking out this episode, or maybe needs to start thinking about how they're going to pay their crypto taxes, go ahead and share the episode's link with them via DM, email, or you could even text it. Thanks again for checking out More Than Blockchain, and I'll see you next time.